Hello, guys. Jerry Learns Business. I have a very special guest. I met this person when I was interning at Fox 29. Eventually, I started working for Fox 29, but I still remember very bright part of my day. She was such a great person, great,
Oh,
awesome person. Kerry Barrett, Fox 29 anchor, now entrepreneur. So, Kerry, welcome.
thank you. Thank you for having me. I was so excited to get your message on LinkedIn because obviously I remember you because you were a standout intern and then a standout employee. But how many years ago was that now?
I met you 7 years ago, and I left Fox
Gosh.
29 6 years ago. So,
Yeah, things have changed. You're out in California now.
that's right. I'm out in California and I decided to create this channel because I've always been kind of an entrepreneur, but I never
Yeah.
had any official training. So I wanted to learn from other people who are doing it. None of us really have the answers, but all of us have a piece of the answers. And that's why I
Yeah.
wanted to bring you on.
That's it. You're absolutely right. I was in the news business for 20 years or close to it anyway. I don't want to add too many additional years on to my ages that are not entirely necessary. But I just started this business about a year ago and I've never done anything other than news. And so it was a very steep learning curve, one that I am still climbing.
Mhm.
When it comes to understanding the business side of things, on camera stuff, that's fine. I could do it in my sleep. I tell you what you need to do. I could do that in my sleep. But I'm ashamed to say it was only a few short months ago that I fully understood what a P&L was and, SEO and ROI and all these other terms that business people throw around as if they're standard language, which I had no idea. And of course, didn't tell anybody I didn't know. I just would quickly Google something after they left the room and figure it out.
Tell me about when you first had this itch. Was it a while ago or was it pretty recent?
It was a long time ago, except I didn't exactly know what the itch was. And it's interesting that you asked that, Jerry, because I've connected with a lot of ex-newsies in this process that I'm going through who are now doing their own thing. And we all talk about, or many of us, I should say, talk about how we stayed in the business long past what I call our expiration date. And by that, I don't mean we were too old to be in news, although that can be a thing for women too. What I mean is that we all knew that we were not happy there, but it was something we were familiar with it. We were, good at it, not terrible at it, depending on what viewer you talk to. But we didn't know what it was. And so it was only really listen, what's the standard transition for somebody in TV? They go into PR.
Yeah.
I know what PR is, but what does a day in the life of somebody who works in PR actually look like? That I didn't know. And I knew that I had done something that I was good at for a long time, but I didn't like what the day-to-day had become. I found it almost painful to go into work, even though I really enjoyed the people I work with. And I need to say that because news is full of some great personalities. And so it was in the course of networking that I met a woman who did PR and communications for a large law firm in New York City. And I was, hey, what do you do in PR? And she's like, you're crazy to think about going back into corporate, either in an agency or working for a business, because you have this skill that you've curated over 20 years and not a lot of people have it, and everybody needs video now, and you need to go in and teach them how to do it, and then you swoop out again when the problem's fixed, and then if they have another problem they bring you in again. I'm like, oh my God, yeah, I don't know why I didn't think of that. That's what I'm doing. So I went home and told my husband that I was going to start a new business, and he almost lost his mind. I'm sorry, what? You barely know how to balance a checkbook, woman, which is true. He was not being rude. But I knew that I didn't want to do news anymore. I knew that I enjoyed video and I enjoyed storytelling. And so how could I create this whole thing around that? And I thought, I don't know exactly what it looks like. And it's changed even in the last year. But that's what I'm doing now. And that's where the whole thing started.
Wow. It sounds
Yeah.
like, you had a very supportive husband, but also you got very honest feedback from him too, which is very important too.
100%. And you know what? And the honest feedback continues to come in from him and from other people. Jerry, one of the things that I found, and I did networking for news prior to this, but it was a different, you're kind of propped up by the station as, oh, this is our anchor and she's here to talk about this thing. And people are usually somewhat interested in what you have to say. But networking outside of that was a whole different thing. And I can tell you that it was invaluable. There's some strategy to it. And I really had to learn how to make sure that I was connecting with the right people and doing the right things. And sometimes you don't know necessarily right off the top whether this is a good strategic move for you. But to answer your question about having honest feedback, thank God, because I feel like really I finally have found, I always heard people reference their tribe. And I'm like, what is that exactly? I don't think I have one of those. But I have found it in this new field. And it's not just from other business owners and entrepreneurs. It's from people from my former life as a newsie who are supporting what I do now, or they see a press release come out about something that I'm offering and they pick me up to do a media hit, or they make a connection for me for someone who is looking for voiceover work or on talent or on camera work. And then on the business side of things, it's, hey, here's a great marketing agency. And hey, you need to stop doing this shit for free because you don't need to do it for free anymore. You need a strategy for pricing. And having people who are willing to say that to you, like it sounds cheesy. I really am so grateful for having great people around me that help me navigate this new path and tell me when I need to step down and when I'm completely screwing it up. Because I do that almost every day.
And why don't we talk about the day in the life of Kerry Barrett? What do you do now when you wake up, and what do you do last thing before you sleep?
Oh my gosh. Well, I don't sleep. It's funny, Jerry, because as Jerry knows, when I was in the news business, I worked the morning show generally is what I did. A couple of years here and there where I did evenings, but generally my lane was morning news. And I love morning news and I love the format. And I love that it has a lot more room for spontaneity and personality and real camaraderie between the reporters and the anchors and the producers and everything else. But I was getting up at 1:30 every morning, and I was just beside myself, exhausted. I mean, I can't even begin to describe the exhaustion. I'm tired now, but in a different way. I'm just tired because I love it. Absolutely love it, what I'm doing right now. But it's a different kind of stress. It's not the deadline stress of news. It's keeping everything in order and making sure that follow up with clients is appropriate and that they're getting what they need, and that my pipeline is full with other clients that are coming to. All of that stuff is new to me, which is why that part is so stressful. I'm up usually at 6 a.m, generally because my little guy, my 3-year-old, is up at 6 a.m, and so I'm up at 6 a.m too. And my day usually consists of, well, it's a little different now that nobody's in school because of Corona, but my day usually consists with me hopping on the computer at about 7 a.m, getting an idea of what my schedule's like, following up on some quick emails that came in overnight. And then usually my training sessions begin at like 9 o'clock, and like this morning, I actually had an 8:30, I have a 9, I had a 10, I had an 11, I have you at 11:30, I have a 12:30, and then I have a 1:30. And then finally, after that 1:30 is over, I can start to put together like the proposals that need to go out and the right agendas for training sessions that are coming up. And one of the big initiatives that I'm doing is some online courses, because I used to do a lot of keynote speaking and public speaking. And Jerry, I'm talking a lot, so just jump in when you need me to shut up. So that's all on ice now for who knows how long. And so I'm really stepping up my development of online courses, which is something that I always wanted to do, but I saw it a little bit further, maybe like a year out or 9 months out, not now. But everybody's at home, everybody, right? And there's such a need for people who they don't have an on-camera career, but suddenly they are thrust into an on-camera role because everything we do is now on Zoom or FaceTime or Skype or Google Hangouts, or it's Google Meet now. But so you've got sales teams that are doing everything on camera. You've got people who were laid off from their jobs because of coronavirus who are now having to do interviews on camera. You have high school students who are not going to be able to make their college trips or their college tours, to meet professors and admissions people, but also for their interviews. All of that is on camera. So I'm developing courses for all of those different niches, which is extremely time consuming, but I know actually is a service that is needed right now because people are just unfamiliar with how to be professional and present on camera. It's quite different than it is like a FaceTime or whatever when you're having a networking event or happy hour with your buds.
Yeah. And just to add on to that, I had to teach someone the other day. She was a Chinese teacher. I had to teach her, rule of thirds, because she was putting herself like this, right? Or, basic things that most of us who've been on camera know. But
this is my favorite one.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
I love, that's always a great shot, Jerry. I know you've seen that, right?
Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah. I had to teach her about that. I had to teach her, about how to center yourself, how to not center yourself, et cetera. Right. And most people also don't understand the camera head's here. You're looking them in the eye, right? A lot of people, they're looking at the screen, but then they're not looking at people in the eye.
I was coaching somebody on an interview and had to conduct one. And one of his questions was, and this is more of a tip trick. And so I said, you know what, I could create a video about this. So his question was, I never knew where to look. And the answer is really pretty simple. It's if you are the one talking, you are looking in that camera. And I know it's hard because I see my face down here and I see your face down here. But if I'm looking at either of them, I'm not actually looking to whomever is watching this. And so in order to do that, I need to be looking at that camera. And it doesn't mean that I have to like stare you down or get in your business or up in your space. And it's okay to break gaze because that's how we talk. But it's also hard to I can't see you, right? Jerry, you could be making faces at me right now. Or I can't read your facial expression. You could be, giving me the bird for all I know. But when you're talking is then when I look down, and I advise people, look down in the monitor because it's okay. That person should be looking in the lens. And that way you can read their facial expression and their body language and put a little bit of context around their words, and then re-engage with the audience when you need to by looking back up in the lens. But it takes practice. All of this stuff is like, it's a little dance that you have to learn the right steps to. And it's not a science. It's somewhat of an art that's dependent upon who you're speaking to. And if there's a broader audience and what it is you're talking about. So you have to learn the nuance and the feel and just kind of calibrate your performance, for lack of a better word, with whomever's on the other side.
Tell me about when you first started. How did you find those initial clients? I think that's a good question for a lot of entrepreneurs because a lot of them don't know how to get those initial hits or that initial sale or whatever. So tell me about that, Kerry.
That was really tricky. And I was not, one of the problems for me was that although I knew what it was that I could do and that it was a necessary service, I had trouble articulating what it would mean to somebody else because, a public speaking coach, what's the ROI? Well, I don't know. I can't really judge the return on investment. You're paying me this much money. I don't know what your capacity to learn is. It's not like, hey, this is a simple, I tell you to integrate this new, very specific and tactical process, and then you can see your sales jump. It's like, I may give you great coaching, but if you really suck, it may take more than 1 or 2 sessions. So that part was very hard for me to articulate. And what I've actually learned is that it means that I need to do a more thorough pre-check of my clients because there are some who are interested who I'm not a good fit for them right now, or they're not a good fit for me, or both, because they're not at a space where they have enough availability or enough time or budget or whatever the case may be, ability to learn. And honestly, the first thing that I did was I hired some people to help me. I hired a business coach, which I wasn't making any money at that point. So that was money that came out of savings, but it was some of the best money I ever spent. If you have the ability to hire a business coach when you are starting out, I can, hands down, he or she will teach you how to get clients in your pipeline, the proper pitch that you need to use when you are networking, where to network, how to generate warm leads, how to keep your pipeline full. I mean, it can be as tactical as when you go into a discovery meeting, where do you sit at the table and why do you sit there? All of those things. And here's what you need. So that was very helpful in generating clients. My first client was somebody that I met through a networking organization called BNI. And it is a exclusive referral service is basically what it is. So within each BNI group, you can only have one person who does PR or one person who does this or one person who's an electrician, et cetera, et cetera. And I met a guy there who builds websites. And he said, I need video training because I need to release video content. And I said, that's great. I need a website. Let's barter. And I learned some things about bartering, but I got my first real client out of that. And then then he tells somebody, Kerry did this for me, and it grows. And then it's leveraging all of those clients that you have in order to generate more. So I always get video testimonials and I put them on LinkedIn and I put them on the website and I add them to YouTube and I pull out little snippets, and it's leveraging all of that. LinkedIn, depending a little bit on where your business is such a fantastic networking tool. It has grown in leaps and bounds even since I joined a year ago. And if you do a great post and it trends in a certain area, you will find people reaching out to you. And that's become a fantastic source of new leads and new clients.
Yeah. Kerry, it's really interesting hearing your story because you started out very much word of mouth. And then from word of mouth, then you built something. You built more of the online traffic. You built more of the online leads. And I think that's so important, especially in our day and age when people are being even more disconnected, especially now people are basically all virtual. It's like the importance of human relationships. You can't just only rely on web presence and all that. And I see that a lot in YouTubers too. You know, some of them, if you meet them in person, no personality, or you meet them in person, they have no follow-up. And you can't just rely on an online thing because ultimately you have to interact with the person.
Yeah, it's so interesting that you say that, Jerry. There's a woman who I know in New York who is working on putting together almost like a finishing school for the younger generation. And the reason is she says, you know what, I do some work with this company in New York, a bigger company, and they hire influencers. They'll hire, a girl out of Utah because she has 2 million followers on Instagram, but my God, she can't speak to a client or a potential client because she doesn't know how to do it. She can only do it on camera when she has the opportunity to really curate her Instagram feed, and she can do 100 takes if she needs to. So she's doing a finishing school for younger people who have great camera presence, but don't necessarily have that one-to-one kind of the ability to walk the walk and talk the talk on all the different platforms, whether they're digital or whether they're face-to-face, which is just as important. You really can. I mean, there are things that you can do in a face-to-face conversation that video is great. And it is where it's at when it comes to marketing and video emails and et cetera, et cetera. But when you're first starting out, especially, it's so helpful to have that one-to-one kind of conversation and even just be able to sit down. And I will tell you, I had so much benefit from being able to sit down and talk to people, not necessarily in my exact space, but people who had, I started my business 2 years ago, or I started my business 10 years ago, and here's all the mistakes I made, or here's what I'm dealing with now. Just kind of finding mentors, even if you don't officially call them that, people who are willing to spend some time with you to help you hopefully avoid some of the mistakes that they made, and we've all made plenty of them.
let's talk about, if you can, share with me one mistake that you made that if anyone is an entrepreneur or wants to be an entrepreneur should learn from.
I spread my net too wide. And by that, I mean, and listen, I'm going to tell you this advice now, whomever is listening that may be considering starting their own business. My bet is that you don't listen to it and that you do it anyway, because I know the feeling. It's like you're almost panicked in the beginning. You're like, I just want to go as far and wide as I can and see what gets caught up in the net. And hopefully there's something there that works. The problem with that, though, is that it takes up so much of your time, and you find yourself saying yes to clients who are not necessarily great fits, and then require a ton of additional work on your behalf because you're not necessarily 100% up on exactly what it is that they want. And so it requires extra research, when really the smartest thing to do for your time and your money is to create a very specific lane. Make sure there's a need for that lane, right? That's key. Don't go down a lane that there's not a need for, but create a very specific lane, create expertise in that area, and then from there, grow everything. It intuitively feels like the wrong thing to do, because you feel like as a brand new business person, you should be casting your net far and wide and see whatever gets caught up in it. But I went down a lot of rabbit holes using that exact process. And what happens is that you end up bringing in a bunch of people who want a lot of free strategy. And some of them are worth giving free strategy because, there's a possibility for collaboration down the road, or they have something to offer. But what you end up doing is giving a lot of stuff away for free, hoping that it generate some interest, and really you'd be better served and you'd be making more money. You'd be making a deeper dive into your market if you were able to focus on one lane. There's actually a great book written about it. It's called The One Thing. And I highly recommend that to anybody who's looking to start their own business or is an entrepreneur. The One Thing, it's a fantastic business book, and it talks about that exactly. I will tell you, I read it once when I was first starting, and I was like, no. Then I went on my scattered course for the next 4 or 5 months, and I'm like, maybe I'll take another look at that book. And then I read it again, and I'm like, that makes sense. Okay, I get it now. And so I've pivoted, which is the word for 2020, and now I'm focusing really on some very specific service offerings.
Yeah, Kerry, it's awesome you mentioned this, because the equivalent of people who want to get started on digital media or want to do YouTube or whatever, any kind of influencer, is that they also spread themselves too thin, because at first it's like, wow, this company wants to work with me, or this guy wants to collaborate with me. Oh, let's do it. But as you get to a certain point, I had to do the same thing you did, Kerry. I had to be like, this company, no, sorry. This company, no, sorry. This YouTuber, no, absolutely not.
Yeah,
this
that's
person
bad for
that I
my
met
brand.
at a networking event, absolutely not. No, like you really have to be selective. In your case, clients. In my case, you have to be selective with people who you collaborate with. Just like you said, a lot of times, the really sad part about life is because humans are so different. It's the beauty of it, but a lot of times we're not compatible, at least business-wise. Right. So you have to be honest with yourself in that, because you might waste time. You might waste your advice. Your advice is worth money. So you might waste your advice. You might waste a lot of things. You might waste your vibe. If you meet up with someone or work with someone, it just doesn't fit, man, it destroys your mood too.
It does. And I tell you, I've worked with a couple of clients who I realize, there are, unless you have some time to dedicate to really learning and putting in, so let's take what I do, for example. We'll talk about video presentation. We'll narrow it down to that. Unless you really have some time to dedicate, or you already have a certain level of expertise, what I've learned is if you are really new and you're really scared on camera, I need to make sure that you have to get you where you want to be, right? Here are your goals. Here's where you come in to this process, your skill set, and here's your availability. You must have the proper availability, because otherwise you're never going to get to where it is that you want to be. And I had a client like that in the very beginning who wanted to be a rock star on camera, but had like an hour a month to dedicate to practice. And I took it because it's a client. But then I realized, oh my God, he's going out and telling everybody he works with me. I can't have that. It was damaging to my brand. Not really. but you have to be very careful about those things, right? I mean, I know the intuitive response to somebody who wants to work with you is yes, but you got to like look a little bit further down the road. Am I wasting my time? Is this going to work? Will you damage my brand? Are we going to be a good fit together? When you go out and tell somebody that you're working with me, am I going to be happy that you did that? Or am I going to be like, oh my God, don't tell anybody? Because he didn't have the time, you know? And so it's part of that is learning is really fine tuning your pre-screening process as well. And when you're brand new, you don't know how to do that. It's trial and error.
Yeah, and I can add 2 stories to that too. One time, it was through a friend who worked with me, and we had good, made some good videos. He wanted to introduce his friend to me, right? So usually, especially in industries like the ones we are, we trust word of mouth, right? So if it's a friend who we had good relationship, who introduced, okay. And then now this friend that he introduced me, man, would never show up. And so eventually it's like, I guess I don't care if you're going to tell your friend that, you know, oh, you didn't get to work with me. You know, you're putting your friend's reputation on the line, and you're also flaking on me, wasting my time. So that was a very interesting case I dealt with. The other interesting case I dealt with, and I'm sure, Kerry, you probably have met people who used to watch you, who were your fans. I met this fan who got inspired by me to start a YouTube channel. So like, you know, it could have been a good fit, but man, this dude did not know how to listen. He'd ask me for advice. I'd get started on explaining it to him, and he'd interrupt me and ask me something else. And I was like, oh, okay. It's cool that I inspired you, but I'm not working with you. And then I eventually had to just tell him to go away, because he tried to hit me up on LinkedIn again after like the face-to-face. It was so bad. So it's like, you know, those are 2 stories that come to mind when I think about pre-screening people. And I've definitely gotten better at that too, you know, these years.
It's tough. Some people are not coachable. They think they are, but they're just not. And part of figuring that out is seeing how they handle that initial discovery, right? When we sit down and we talk for an hour about what your goals are and where you want to get, and do you listen? Do you interrupt? Sometimes interrupting is appropriate, but it's beginning to understand what a good fit feels like almost more than anything else. You know what I mean? Like, and that's where it does become somewhat of an art and less of a science. It's a mix of both, but you're 100%. And I've had the same like there was a woman that was referred to me who wanted public speaking coaching, and she was referred by a friend. And then I had to battle her it wasn't even a lot of, she paid a deposit, she owed 50%. And I had to battle her for that 50%. I mean, her feedback was, oh my gosh, yeah, this was great. This was amazing. You were so good. Blah, 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 blah. And then she didn't pay. And I'd send her a reminder, and she didn't pay. And she sent a reminder, she didn't pay. And I finally went back to the person who referred her, and I'm like, listen, I'm just letting you know, like, I trusted you. And so I took her, but she's not paying. And so I know you, but be aware, because there are other people you may refer her to if she doesn't pay, and they don't know you the way I do. And it's going to look bad on you. Right? Those are the things you have to be aware of too. And I think that speaks to the first story that you were talking about, Jerry, right? You got to be aware of your credibility on everywhere.
I used to be the type of person who would be like, oh man, I met this guy and this person. Oh, let's connect them. And now I'm much more careful about that too, because being on the receiving end of it, when someone's connecting me and like that person doesn't make them look good, I'm like, okay, I got to be careful who I connect to.
It on all fronts, Jerry, you got to be like vigilant. It's just, and you learn, you know. I will say, thankfully, I haven't had a lot of really, I haven't had a lot of horrible experiences. And I know, like in the beginning, I knew that I was not in a place to be making great referrals. And so somebody would refer me, and I would say, well, what is a good connection for you? And I have every intention when I was in a good place of making that connection, and I did. But I would also preface this by saying, listen, I'm still learning who I am. I'm learning who all of these people are. If I find this person for you, I will connect you, but I need to be very strategic, and I'm not in a great place to be making referrals right now because I don't know what I need to know about everybody. So please be patient with me. And I find that most people, when you explain things to them that way, they understand. I wasn't looking to be a taker. I was just looking to be a little more strategic in the referrals that I provided, because I don't know what I don't know. And that's what it comes down to, I think, everywhere. I'm only beginning to learn what I don't know, and there's a lot.
One thing, Kerry, just talking to you now, I mean, even when I met you at Fox 29, I could see that you were such a funny person, like very funny, spontaneous person. And I knew that back when you worked at news, especially because when we worked together, we were both on the evening hour. So I knew you couldn't really, express the spontaneity, this funny side of you. But it seems like now with what you're doing, I could really see kind of like the full Kerry come out.
Oh, well, not the full Kerry. I don't know who's going to be, there's some things I need to keep under wraps.
Well, that's true.
I've learned as I've aged that there may have been an inappropriate joke or two made on my behalf during my time at Fox 29. All kidding aside though, you're right. Evening news, as much as I preferred the hours, was never a great fit for me because it was very formatted and it was a really, everything was very structured and very tight. There was not a lot of room for like discourse or spontaneity. I feel like there is, and I will say this to some degree, morning news, because you're always driven by what your viewer wants to hear and what your boss wants to hear and the interplay with your co-anchors or the reporters around you or whatever. And so that was spontaneous to a degree. I mean, certainly like Fox 29, that place was almost no holds barred in the morning. NBC is a little different. And so where I am now, I'm the one who gets to calibrate where I let my personality out and where and how I show that. And it's interesting because, so my website's under construction right now. And you see a million of those, like my website's under construction, please come back on June 13th, blah, 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 blah. And they're so boring. And I would be shocked if anybody actually did come back on June 13th to see whether your website was actually live or not. And so I said to the marketing team, I'm like, let's do a video. How about we do a video construction banner, right? Me doing something. And I think the thought was that I was going to be like, hey, I'm Kerry. My website's under construction, blah, 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 blah. But what I did instead was I got a hard hat. I put a hard hat on and I'm like, holy crap. I had no idea that constructing a website was so time intensive. I'm ripping out floors. I'm pulling out plumbing, blah, 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 blah. And I made this really creative video with help that I have gotten more commentary on because it is different and unusual and it's personality driven, but it still gets the point across. And I would hope, fingers crossed, that more people will come back when the website is live because they remember that video. And so that's how I'm able to, right? And I got a little bit of pushback in the beginning when I described the concept before the video had been seen. I don't know, is that going to speak to executives or CEOs? And I'm like, listen, here's the deal. I made a career out of speaking plainly and simply and with short sentences and in crisp words. And that's what news is. You're writing for the ear. You are delivering your messaging and content in a way that is easily digestible. I'm not going to change that. That is who I am. That is my brand because of my news time. So this video has to speak to it, because if this video is full of corporate jargon and it's convoluted and it's boring as hell, that everybody knows that's not who I am. And so once the video was seen, they're like, I get it now. This is funny. Yes. But you have to have that. Don't be blind, but you have to have that faith in who you are and what you do and what your brand is, because you will get pushback from people who don't get it. And it's not until you can really show it that sometimes that message sinks in, and sometimes it doesn't. And it'll be right for some people and wrong for others. I'm sure there's people who saw that video and were like, she's not professional enough. Well, that's okay. Those people are probably not good fits for me anyway. Yeah. But staying true to yourself. I mean, I know it's easier said than done, but it is so important. It really is. It's hard though.
I have a very quick story too. Back in 2014, I made like a 20-minute video on YouTube. And back then, there were documentaries, but 20-minute videos weren't the norm. Now videos are all over the place on YouTube. But I remember I got this guy, he really thought of himself as my mentor. Whether he was or not is another story. But he always would like give me advice, unsolicited advice. Like, dude, Jerry, stop making 20-minute videos. No one's going to watch.
Unsolicited advice, the best kind of advice.
Yeah, it's the best type of advice because you don't know where it's coming from. And I think it's coming from a good place, but he just kept trying to discourage me from making 20-minute videos. And the really funny thing is, you know, I stuck to it because I knew if I'm interesting and talk about an interesting topic, people will watch 20-minute videos. Like on Fight Commentary Breakdowns, I've made videos that are like 40 minutes and people watch them. And he still has never made a YouTube video. So go ahead.
Well, no, I was going to say, and I didn't mean to cut you off, but you are so spot on, Jerry. It's like people are like, oh no, you should do minutes. Your video should be 30 seconds. I'm like, well, some of them will be, but if you have somebody who's compelling on camera and knows what they're doing, and maybe you may not think either of those things about me after watching this video, but I know to some of my audience I am. And so that's okay. I can do a compelling 2-minute video or 5-minute video or 15-minute video if you need me to do. But it's like knowing your strengths as well. And just because that's not what everybody else is doing, like realizing that there's a space for you. If that's what you're good at, you just have to find the right audience. So I'm glad you stuck with your guns, Jerry.
That's why I created this new channel too, because I said there was a channel of mine before that people really liked when I interviewed people. And that channel kind of took off on its own brand and doesn't have this type of stuff anymore. But I realized I can bring that back. And that's why I created a new channel. I'm like, you know what? This interview stuff, there's going to be an audience because back in the day, there was an audience and then I strayed and I did other things and I found more audience, but there's going to be an audience that's going to come and watch this again.
Yeah, that's awesome. So when did you start this?
I started this 2 weeks ago.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Am I one of your first?
You're one of the first, man. Thank you, Kerry. Thank you.
My pleasure. I'm so glad you reached out.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the last topic I would love to talk about, we mentioned this too, about sort of like when people realize it's not the right fit. What should they do? Because, you know, I realized that news wasn't the right fit for me, especially because I saw where everything was going. Everything was going online. And the news manager at the time was like really trying to push, but he didn't really know because, you know, he didn't grow up in that generation. So he was trying to get anchors, he was trying to get producers, everyone to like care a lot about Facebook and stuff, but he was doing it wrong. And I was like, okay, I think I can do it better if I just put my mind to it. And
I know the news director you're speaking of.
And so, Kerry,
shall remain unnamed.
Yeah, exactly. That name. Yeah. So, Kerry, tell me about kind of like your process and being like, okay, well, I feel like this isn't completely right. Where do I go from here? Because that's a hard thing to figure out. Okay, what's the solution to this isn't right?
You know what? I wish there was a one size answer fits all for that. I really don't think there is. And the reason that I say that is because I was able to, so news has been wrong for me for a very long time. I'll preface all of this by saying I probably 7 years into news, not even 6 years into news, I knew that it was not a good fit for me any longer. And I stayed for another almost 14 years. But I knew everything about me had started to change. I became like grumpy. I was exhausted all the time. Part of that was the schedule. I was depressed, and I knew, I think on some level that was part of it, but I stayed with it because the money was good and I knew what I was doing. And to some degree, there was a part of me that thought it was like prestigious. That was a while ago. There's some great people in news, but it's different than it used to be even 10 or 15 years ago. And I was fortunate enough so I'm married and my husband makes a good salary. And so it wasn't a I need to hop out of news and immediately start making money to be able to put food on the table. There was some wiggle room, and the money came in, took much longer than I thought it was going to, especially because there's not a lot of competitors in my space where I am right now, especially. And, but I didn't know how to sell myself, and I didn't know how to sell what I did. And that was part of the reason it took me so long to spool things up. And so the answer, here's what I would suggest. is you have to start to figure out what it is that you want to do. And so if you are still working, I would suggest taking every opportunity. And I've talked to a million reporters who have since left the business, and this is how most of them did it because they're smarter than me. They started networking well before they left the business. Well, if they worked in the mornings, that meant they took 2 afternoons after they got off work to go network. They would just randomly reach out to people they found on LinkedIn. They'd reach out to people they met at other events and just talk to them. What is it that's out there? What are the possibilities because I never thought of opening my own business. It wasn't until I was networking with that one woman to find out about PR that she's like, you should do this. And I was like, holy shit. Yeah, I should. And so trying to give yourself a runway. And by that, I mean, where you're starting to build your brand, your business, yourself to the degree in which you're allowed to do so while you're still working for wherever it is, your corporate job or whatever it is you're doing. Build a runway so that when it does come time for you to leave that corporate job, you have something that is guiding you toward the next step. I did not have that. I was lucky that I had a spouse to fall back on. But the reason I say that is because that's not where everybody is. Some people are being laid off suddenly and abruptly, and they were not able to plan. Some people have to have something that makes money as soon as they step out of whatever position it is that they're currently in. And then some are like, I'm going to take a couple months to find myself and see what it is that I want to do. So knowing what space you're in and where you fall within that spectrum should inform the choices that you make while you're still currently in your job. And I think for me, the final straw was I had started, every time I had thought about getting out of news, I had gotten an offer in a bigger market, and it made sense. I guess in retrospect, I'm not sure. That said, I have no regrets. I'm really glad that I landed where I did. But my final role at NBC, I had started as a breaking news anchor. And so I would anchor and I would cover all sorts of breaking news. And when there wasn't breaking news internationally, nationally, I would do cool like demos and Q&As and walk and talks. It was very interesting. And I got to flex all sorts of creative muscles. And there was a lot of spontaneity and ad-libbing. And I love all of that. And then we hit the 2016 election season, and we had a new general manager and we had a new news director, and their focus for content was quite different. They wanted almost entirely politics, which I mean, I can do it, but I'd never intentionally sign up to be a political reporter. And it's very boring. It's not an opinion show. It's read the words on the prompter and then move on to the next story. And it was just, I mean, you could see it in my performance. I was not into it. And that's when it was officially time to go. But I had no idea what I was going to do.
Kerry, great lessons, man. You had a good support network. So one lesson is have a very good support network. Do your best to have a support network, and also have a good runway. I love that word. Have a good runway. I talked to a lot of people who kind of feel stuck or something. And I asked them a simple question, just a goodness of my heart. I'm not trying to criticize them. I'm like, what are you doing after work? And they're like, oh yeah, I'm tired. I just like kind of go home and watch TV and sleep. And I told them my story, which is even when I was at Fox 29, when I would get home, I would try to network, or I would try to, I would try to make my own videos. And then when I was working at ByteDance, the last company I worked at before I decided to go this entrepreneurial path, after work, I would actually stay at work because the office, nobody was at the office. I would stay at work and like create or do stuff. Like I basically worked 2 jobs. I spent 8 hours after work. I would sleep at like 2 or 3 a.m., 8 hours after work to kind of build my own stuff. Like that's my runway right there, right? Because I knew I didn't have a supportive network. So Kerry, I love those 2 pieces of advice. The runway, and then have a supportive network. And then when the final straw hits, like be honest with yourself and just tell yourself, this is the final straw. And your final straw was the 2016 election. My final straw when I quit my last job was they were trying to move me onto another team that was nothing related to what I wanted to do. It was literally like, oh, he can do whatever well. He's like a chess piece. Oh, we don't care about anything he's done in the past. He's a chess piece. And I was like, whoa.
Yeah, that's it. And you're like, I don't want to be a chess piece anymore. I want to be like either the board or the king, one or the other, but I don't want to be the pawn.
Exactly. Be the board or the king, man. Guys,
Yeah.
this was Kerry Barrett. Amazing,
Aw.
amazing conversation. Amazing knowledge shared.
Yeah.
Kerry, man, how can people get in touch with you? You know, your website's under construction, but how can they find you elsewise?
So you can find me on all of the social media platforms. I'm on TikTok and IG and Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn, especially so. You can also email me. It's Kerry, Kerry, at kerrybarrettconsulting.com. My website should be up by mid-June, so that will be kerrybarrettconsulting.com, provided all the elements are in place. We're on schedule right now, so fingers crossed.
So for those of you watching Jerry Learns Business, I will put all these links and everything in the description and pinned comments, etc. So Kerry, thank you so much.